Hi, I'm Brooke, and you're watching The Vintage Gardener. I want to apologize in advance if this video is a little rough. I don't do YouTube videos, and so this is one of my first ones, and I'm sure they're going to get better at time, but I ask that you bear with me. If you're watching this video, it's because you're on the page of the blog called About Me. So rather than write a long post about me, I thought it would be more interesting if I just told you about me. So like I said, my name is Brooke Bonet. I live in New Jersey in the southern part of it in a town called Medford. So that puts me in growing zone 7A. In terms of my age, I'm 25 plus shipping and handling. That's how I like to put it. And I am an attorney. Before I went to law school, I went to Johns Hopkins University. I majored in economics, and then I took a year off. I went to law school, graduated in 2005, and I've been practicing ever since. I've been practicing for about 14 years. I do defense work. I do insurance defense, and I am considered to be a senior level attorney. I have tried 30 plus cases, and I'm getting a little burnt out, which is why I'm looking to change gears, which is why I'm looking to run from the law, as they say. So that's about what I do when I'm not doing this. In terms of gardening, I don't think I'm like most people who took up gardening. I was what I would refer to as botanically challenged as a child. It was very bad. The amount of destruction I could do in my mother's garden in 5 minutes was unbelievable. As a matter of fact, I got banned from her garden. That's how bad it was. I don't know, a lot of people, when I watch gardening bloggers, they talk about, all the happy memories they had with their mom or their dad or their nana. And, my earliest memory of the garden is my mother telling me to get out of the garden because I had just done something I shouldn't have. It started out with weeding. I was one of those people who had a really difficult time telling the difference between a weed and a plant. And so, she would tell me, my sister, we had to go weed the garden, and I'd be out there, and I'd just be pulling stuff up, and I'm like, oh, I'm nailing this. I got this. And then I hear my mom go, Brooke, what are you doing? And I'm going, what do you mean, what am I doing? You told me to weed. I'm weeding. And she's like, that's not a weed, it's a plant. I'm like, that is not a plant, that's a weed. No, that's a plant. Mom, no. Plants have flowers. Weeds do not. This does not have a flower, ergo, it is a weed. She should have known I was going to turn out to be a lawyer back then. And so I noticed like my sister in the background just, shaking her head, rolling her eyes to the heavens, and I got sent inside so my mom could try to mitigate the damage that I had done. I think most moms probably would have called it quits after that, but not my mom. Got to give her credit though, because she was determined that I was gonna get it. So we repeated that process a couple of times. My mom's like, well, your weeds look different than the plants. So, after I ripped up the ones I wasn't supposed to, I realized those are plants. So I looked for stuff that didn't look like that, not realizing that plants don't look like plants look different. And so I was like, well, it doesn't look like this, it must be a weed. But no, it was just a different plant. And so, I did it again. And, got to the point that I would be outside and we asked my sister, can you point out all the weeds? Which one's a weed? And then I'd pull those. And, my sister was getting frustrated because every time I got to the end, I'd have to have her come back over and point out all the weeds again. And so, they were like, no, you can do it on your own. And so I remember my mom was like watching me. And this is like the last time I actually did any gardening. And she finally, I could see the look of resignation on her face when she realized that, this girl just cannot tell a weed from a flower. And she's like, you really can't, can you? And I'm like, no, I can't. I don't understand, what you guys, what is it that you're seeing? What looks so different to you? So she sent me back inside. So she's like, well, you know what, go cook dinner because you're good at that. Because I'm a good cook and I can bake. And so I'd either be baking or, baking bread or cooking or practicing the piano when I stayed out of the garden. I do remember one time my mom needed some help. So she's like, well, honey, I need you to do something in the yard. And I'm looking at her like, okay, the last time this did not go good. So she's like, no, I'm going to let you fertilize. So she had one of those like screw bottles you put on the base of a hose. It's like with the Miracle-Gro in it. And you just have to like hose, it was like, hosing the plant. And I guess she figured she can't do much damage. And so, she told me, oh, keep shaking the bottle because you need to make sure it's mixed. I'm like, all right. So, I was shaking it, and in all the shaking that I kept doing, it was coming unloose. So I shook it one final time and it just hit the ground. It splashed everywhere. And then my mom comes over and, trying to hose it, like, hose it down. I think it just spread it. And so I remember like there was a burn mark in the grass. And I remember a couple days later, my dad was just like, oh, what happened? And it's like, oh, Brooke striked again. And so then the next thing she tried was, it was mowing the lawn. And so that didn't work. I mean, you're going to give me something motorized now with a blade on it. Like this is just, this is not asking for disaster to happen. So she had a tulip tree. It was this little cutting she got from this lady in my church. And, it's her fault because she put it out in the middle of the grass and she didn't put like any border around it, no mulch, nothing. It was just this little stick. It was just like maybe, I don't know, like 6 inches of sticking out of the ground. Now, we lived in Chemong, and Chemong is wooded. So there were times, like, branches came down, like twigs came down, and they would come down and like they'd be standing straight up in the grass and just mow them over. So I saw what I thought was a twig, and I think I was actually using the riding mower, so I just went over it. Mom came out and realized that her tulip tree was gone. And she was like, you didn't see that was a tulip tree? And I'm like, I thought that was a twig. She's like, you couldn't tell the difference? Listen, it's not like it had leaves on it or anything. It was just a twig. And so, after that, I never got tasked to help around outside because it was just dangerous. I remember when I was 14, I think it was 14, we had to do these science fair projects every year, and they alternated. One year it was like biological sciences, the other year it was like physical sciences. And so it was a biological science project, and so I decided to tackle some botany. Well, actually, you know what? I think it was a physical science because the topic was, no, I take it back. It was biological sciences because I was going over plants. And so the experiment I did after researching about plants was, did growing plants under different wavelengths of light affect the growth? So I bought some bachelor button seeds. And I was going to grow some bachelor buttons in 3 different trays. One was going to be natural light, one was going to be a grow light, and the other light was going to be pink. Because I wanted to see what was going to happen. And so I was very proud of myself because I actually got 3 trays of seed to actually, like all of them started, like I got sprouts in every one. And I just remember going, oh my gosh, I actually am growing a plant. This is awesome. And so I did my thing. I had my data, I had my research, and I went and did my thing. And then my knowledge of planting just kind of went up because the teacher was like, well, why did you measure height? Well, isn't that what you do? Like, isn't that the measure of a plant? Like how tall they got? And my teacher was saying something about the plants, shouldn't they be, don't you want more bushy rather than tall? And I had no idea what he was talking about, and quite frankly, I think at a certain point he realized she has no idea what I'm talking about, because what he was talking about was the fact that because I was doing grow lights, which were shorter, which actually they weren't short enough, they were still a little too high. I was looking at it as they grew taller, not understanding that they were growing stringy, and that using grow lights, especially because they should have been closer, I should have actually had a shorter plant that had, more leaves on it. And so what is happening is that I can never remember how to pronounce the first set of leaves that plants get, but basically they just have those two leaves. I don't recall that any of them actually developed the first set of true leaves on the plant. So that was, and then after that, of course, all the seedlings died. I'm glad the experiment ended when it did. So I left gardening alone, and I started getting interested in it when I went to college, and I think it was like my senior year, because of the Martha Stewart show. And so I came home, I think it was like for Christmas break or something, and you're up late, and they started showing all this stuff at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was the Martha Stewart show, and I was like, oh, hey, what's this cooking show? And I watched it, and I was like, oh, this is great. So then I realized in college, which was Johns Hopkins, in Baltimore, it showed at 9 o'clock in the morning every single morning. Which was when I was usually in class, but I started taping it. And so I like gardens. I just couldn't do it myself. But, she was doing these segments on gardening. And I remember the first thing that was just mind-blowing to me was soil. I thought that with plants, you just pop them in the ground and that was it. Because as far as I could see, that's really what my mom did. Like, she bought stuff, she put it in the ground, it seemed to do well, or what I thought was doing really well. I mean, as time goes on, I've realized that probably her plants probably would have been bigger if she had done different things, but it just seemed to do well. And so she was going on in the segment about soil and her mix of soil, and at the time she took like soil, but she mixed it with like peat moss and sand. And so she did the water test, like where she said, when you do to test your soil, take some, what the soil, pick it up, squeeze it out, and then, this is what it should look like. And so I didn't know that. And so I didn't, and I didn't realize that, really there should be lots and lots of earthworms and all this other stuff. And I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And the kicker to me was that she did a tour of her rose garden. And this was I'm trying to think, which farm was it? Was that the Turkey Hill farm, I think? And she had this huge area, and I remember she excavated down 2 feet and removed all the soil because the soil was bad. And she had like new soil, like I guess whatever mix she wanted brought in, and she planted the roses. And I remember she took a picture after the roses had been there for 2 years, and I tell you what, those roses were huge. I mean, the garden looked like it had been sitting there. It had been there for like 30 years. It was amazing. She had tall structures. The roses had grown up these structures. It was just incredible. And I never realized that the soil could do that. So after I graduated from college and I came home and my mom was gardening, I was, telling her all about Martha Stewart, like what I had seen. And so when she's digging, I was like, oh, let me do this test that Martha Stewart said you should do on your soil. And so I did. And come to find out, the soil was compacted. And I was like, oh no. And my mom was like, what? I was like, well, Martha Stewart says it's not supposed to look like this. It's supposed to be like, blah, blah. And she said, oh, so what are we supposed to do? And my mom was like, yeah. And we were digging the garden. I was like, oh, there's no earthworms here. And so, and so she said, well, what does Martha Stewart say you should do? And so we went to Home Depot, we got some peat moss, we got sand, we got it in, we mixed it all in, And Martha Stewart had also done about composting. So I was like, okay, well, let's compost. Let's, we gotta put more nutrients back in things. We're putting eggshells and banana peels and all this, organic matter and stuff in it. And, a year later, the plants definitely grew bigger than they had in years past, and the soil was nice. And then when my mom was digging it, there were like tons of earthworms. And so that was kind of it. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize that, there was a science to gardening. By this point, every stuff started being on the World Wide Web. And so I started researching, and I started getting the Martha Stewart magazine. Of course, she always had the gardening stuff on there. And I started experimenting, and eventually got to the point I got to the point where I actually was able to grow things and have them last for more than a year, which was very exciting. And I think the first thing I had success with were lilies. And there's this one lady on Martha who was a guest on Martha Stewart, and she was like, "That's like the easiest bulb to grow." And so when I went to the flower show one year, I got some lilies, and I actually, I still have those. I still have those lilies. Actually, I have a couple out in the yard, so I still have them. And yeah, so those. I'm trying to think, how long have I had those lilies then? Well, I guess I probably had them at least 10 years, probably more. And I never thought I'd be able to keep anything that alive that long. So I still have them. And so that's how I ended up becoming a gardener and becoming rather proficient at it. I hope I hope you guys found that interesting, and I hope you found it, most importantly, just encouraging, because, if I can go from killing everything in sight in under 5 minutes to actually having a garden that, comes back, anybody can do it. So that's what this blog, a lot of it's going to be about. It's just going to be about teaching people how to just the basics of gardening and soil and that sort of thing. Because I think that's really I think that was my biggest problem, is that, there wasn't a lot of I guess there probably was stuff out there, but it wasn't, in my opinion, as accessible as it is now. And I think if I had all the resources that we have today available then, I probably would have taken to gardening when I was a lot younger. So this is the About Me section. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more. I will probably not be posting videos a lot, because like I said, I am an attorney and I do try cases, and that obviously takes a lot of time. But I'm hoping that, as things progress, and I can start, some of the videos are probably going to be more short, just because it'll probably be just going to be easier. But hopefully over time I will, get in the swing of things, and I'll be able to post, videos on hopefully a weekly basis. I'm not going to get all crazy and say a couple times a week, but hopefully a weekly basis. So thank you for watching.